Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. Micah, doom first, salvation later. Small town prophets seem to have a special connection to the poor in stern words for rich people who exploit the poor. Like Amos, who ministered a few years before him, Micah comes from a small village. And just like Amos, he targets people who abuse power and privilege. 1. The rich who get richer through extortion and violence. 2. Merchants with scale weighted in their favor like loaded dice. 3. Judges who sell judgment for a bribe. 4. Prophets and priests who say whatever the people will pay to hear, which we get a lot of that nowadays too. And 5. Rulers who do whatever it takes to live in luxury and preserve their power. But Micah doesn't stop with society's elite. He goes after their victims as well. These less privileged Jews could have taken their pleas to God against him for help. Instead, they go to idols. Many seem to feel they can satisfy God by treating him as one of the many gods they worship, offering his required sacrifices but living as they please. Micah sets them straight. The Lord has told you what is good, Micah says, and this is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God, Micah 6:8. Yet most of the people and their leaders do none of this, so Micah warns them of the consequences. Invaders will dismantle the two Jewish nations and exile the citizens. But after the doom, salvation comes. God will bring the Jews home to rebuild their nation. Micah doesn't want the Jews to lose sight of the hope ahead. Perhaps that's why he weaves salvation into his message, matching all 3 rounds of bad news with rounds of good news. Round 1, doom. And then salvation. Round 2, doom with salvation. And round 3, doom with salvation. Doomsday is coming for the Jews of Micah's day. They will pay for their sins, but the generation to follow can expect God's grace, a clean slate, a fresh start, and a hopeful future. When Micah was giving them hope with doom to salvation, round 1's doom. But if you want to go back through from Micah's 1:1 to 2:11, that was round 1. Round 2's doom was in chapter 3 through chapter 5, and round 3 was chapter 6 through chapter 7. which I actually just read this entire book if you want to go back and follow along there. The main point of the book of Micah: for sins of injustice and idolatry, God is going to let invaders demolish both Jewish nations, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Survivors will be exiled, but in time God will bring the Jews home to rebuild their nation. The writer of this book was Micah, a small-town prophet, and the source of these messages. Either Micah wrote them himself or someone recorded them for him. Many scholars say another writer added material more than a century later. One reason they say this is because Micah lived in the 700s BC. Yet he predicts that the people of Jerusalem will soon be sent in exile to distant Babylon. It's unusual to mention Babylon at all, but especially so since Babylon won't snatch the world's superpower title from Assyria for another century. But Micah still could have wrote it because it could have been a message sent to him from God. The exile Micah mentions took place in 586 BC. The date Micah said his ministry spanned the reigns of 3 kings of Judah: Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. That covers 55 years from about 742 to 687 BC. The location: Micah lived in Morsheth. That's a small village about a day's walk, 20 miles southwest of Jerusalem. Bad news for Jews. Micah 1:16. Shave your heads in sorrow, for the children you love will be snatched away. Micah 1:16. Micah has a message of doom, and he spreads it around. Though he lived in the southern Jewish nation of Judah, there's more than enough doom for Israel in the Northland as well. God's complaint against the people of both nations is that they're breaking the first and most important of the 10 commandments, the 10 laws on which all the other Jewish laws rest. They're worshiping idols. Idolatry headquarters is none other than the capitals of both Jewish nations, Samaria in the north and Jerusalem in the south. Ironically, Jerusalem is supposed to be the holy city, the city of God. In one of the songs that the Jews sing, they praise Jerusalem as the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High. God dwells in the city. It cannot be destroyed. And that is Psalm 46, 4 and 5. As it turns out, this isn't quite true, at least not as many Jews understand the promise. Some of the Jews in Micah's day are counting on Jerusalem's invincibility to protect them from their sins. They figure they can do as they please and count on God to protect his turf no matter what, but we all know it doesn't work that way. It will come as quite a surprise to many that God cares more about his people than he does about his real estate. God will give up his home. God will give up his home on earth, as many Jews consider Jerusalem to be, if this is what it takes to win back his people. Not only is it possible for Jerusalem to be destroyed, Micah warns it will be destroyed. That's Micah's warning for both Jewish capitals, Jerusalem and Samaria. Oddly, the destruction will come in just the way the Jews expected protection. God will protect it, they sing of Jerusalem in one of many Bible songs, praising the city. The nations are in chaos and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders and the earth melts. And that's Psalms 46, 5 through 6. But not this time. For Jerusalem and Samaria, the Lord is coming. The mountains melt beneath his feet. But it's not the foreign nations in chaos, it's the Jewish nations. God promises to turn both cities and the countries they represented into a plowed heap of ruins. In Jerusalem, a thicket will grow on the heights where the temple now stands of ruins. In Jerusalem, a thicket will grow on the heights where the temple now stands. God's heaven on earth will become a weed patch. Bad news for the high and mighty. Micah 2:1. What sorrow awaits you who lie awake at night, thinking up evil plans. You rise at dawn and hurry to carry them out simply because you have the power to do so. Like Amos, Micah seems especially concerned about injustice. With stern warnings of judgment ahead, Micah unloads God's complaints on several elite groups in Jewish society. 1. The greedy rich. Micah 2:2. When you want a piece of land, you find a way to seize it. When you want someone's house, you take it by fraud and violence. You cheat a man of his property, stealing his family's inheritance. 2. Exploitive political leaders. Micah 3:2 through 3. You skin my people alive, you chop them up like meat for the cooking pot. Prophets prophesying from the gut. Micah 3:5. You promise peace for those who give you food, but you declare war on those who refuse to feed you. And priests looking for profit. Micah 3:11. You priests teach God's law only for a price. These people are supposed to be community leaders who look out for the good of the people they serve. Instead, they serve themselves, the good of the people, taking whatever they want. They're no different than raiders. They covet, they plot, they attack, and they do whatever it takes to get what they think they deserve. Micah warns that God is about to give them what they deserve, a taste of their own medicine. The little kingdoms they have built for themselves are about to be confiscated, and instead of singing their own praises, they'll be singing a new song. Micah 2:4. We are finished, completely ruined. Micah lives to see both countries invaded. The Assyrians decimate Samaria in 722 BC, exiling many Jewish survivors who apparently never return. Then in 701 BC, the Assyrians invade the southern Jewish nation of Judah, led by King Sennacherib. The invaders failed to capture Jerusalem, but they devastate the countryside, destroying 46 Judean cities before surrounding Jerusalem. The Jewish king Hezekiah responds by emptying the palace treasury and peeling the gold paneling off the temple doors, delivering it all to Sennacherib. The Assyrians eventually leave, but only after God sends an angel that kills 185,000 soldiers in their camp. A Greek history writer, Herodotus, reported that Sennacherib's army was stopped by a rat infestation, perhaps carrying diseases such as the bubonic plague that killed many soldiers. Judah survives for another century, but in 586 BC, Babylonian invaders finish what the Assyrians started. Babylon's soldiers tear down Jerusalem stone by stone. Then they exile most of the Jews who survive the 2.5-year siege and the vicious attack that comes after Babylon breaks through the city walls. The Messiah from Bethlehem. Micah 5:2 and 5. You, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judah, yet a ruler of Israel will come from you, one whose origins are from the distant past. He will be the source of peace. And we all know who they're talking about, who he's talking about there. Like every other Bible prophet pronouncing doom on the Jews, Micah ends on a positive note. God won't leave the survivors exiled in foreign lands scattered all over the Middle East, from Iran to Egypt. God promises to bring the remnant of Israel home to rebuild their nation. Those who were exiles will become a strong nation, Micah 4:7. He also promises to send a mysterious ruler, which we already know, and it's not a mystery. This ruler won't come from a king living in the capital. Instead, he'll be born in the small little village of Israel's most beloved king, David. The village is Bethlehem, 6 miles south of Jerusalem. The connection between Ephrathah and Bethlehem is uncertain. Perhaps Ephrathah was an earlier name for the village, or it might have been the name of the dominant family there, or the first Jewish family to settle there. Many Jewish scholars in ancient times said these verses point to the Messiah whom God promised to send, a deliverer from David's family who would restore Israel's glory. One ancient Jewish commentary on Micah, the Targum Jonathan, interpreted Micah's prediction this way: And ye, O Bethlehem, Ephrath, you who were too small to be numbered among the thousands of the house of Judah, from you shall come forth before me the Messiah to exercise dominion over Israel, he whose name was mentioned from before, from the days of creation. Early Christian scholars would later add that these Jewish scholars were right. The Messiah, Jesus, was born in Bethlehem. When star-following wise men came to King Herod on a mission to honor what they think is the newborn king of the Jews, Herod presumes they are talking about the Messiah. Many Jews at the time were weary of Rome's century-long occupation, so they're pleading with God for deliverance and expecting it at any moment. The Messiah is very much on their minds. When Herod asked his scholars where the Messiah will be born? They answer, in Bethlehem in Judea. And that's in Matthew 2:5. Then the site of their source, Micah 5:2. Matthew 2:5. And they said unto him in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, Micah 5:2. But thou, Bethlehem, Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. So don't let anyone tell you that the Old Testament is outdated and doesn't apply today. I actually found that rather interesting, that there's so many prophecies about the coming Messiah, but the wise men actually brought up Micah when it came to talking about where the Messiah would be born. And I also find it interesting that Micah, his prophecy of it was in Micah 5:2. Then when you reverse the numbers around in Matthew 2:5, that's when the wise men bring up the book of Micah in 5:2 and bring up where the Messiah will be born. And both of them bring up Bethlehem. It is just amazing how God works, and His Word truly does speak to us. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. Much love.